Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Basketball PH podcast. Enjoy the show.
What is up mga paps? How are you? Malapit na ang weekend. We have another episode for today. So this is gonna be the last installment of our position battle series. And this is gonna be super special because we've tried and asked our good friends from the international scene to really drop by, share their thoughts. Now we are going to be graced by the presence of a certain representation from the country. So if you're aware, there's we have actually a representation sa international scene. And if you've been following those sports analysts, there's been a long running uh around, I think that's a 30 team deep industry drafts wherein this dude is actually representing us here in the Philippines. Again, one of the reasons that I started this podcast is I do believe that Filipinos are should be on the upper tier in terms of those fans that love basketball. And then it's just weird that not all of us knows how to play fantasy basketball. So that's one of the drivers of why we try to give you contents and help out and reach every Filipino basketball fans. Enjoy the fun of playing fantasy basketball. And if you are a new fantasy basketball GM or even a 10-year GM, I think something that I would like to suggest for you to check out is hoop ball. So if you check out the hoop-ball.com, there's a lot of things there that could help you out in terms of understanding the players, the strategy, and then also there's what we call Aaron Bruschi's top 150. So later on, we are going to ask our guest to talk about this more. And without further ado, let me pull in our guest, Mr. Erik Ong of Hoopball. Let's go. What's up, sir?
Hi, Papi. Thank you for having me on your show. Nice to
For
be
sure,
here.
for sure. It's been a while. You're one of those guests that I've been really chasing since I started this, uh, mini project of mine, the podcast. So it's really a very special day today. How are you today, bro?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. And yes, to acknowledge what you just shared, and just to let all your listeners know, yes, Poppy was wanting me on his show since last season. I was just unfortunately too busy to come because it was a surprise season, a rushed season, in fact, and I didn't have the time, but now I do, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to support a fellow Filipino content creator when it comes to fantasy basketball, and just support each other, support local, right? That's what we say here in the Philippines. So it's
Eh,
support local right now.
Exactly, Pinoy pride. So before we really check out the offerings that you have at Hoopball, let me ask, how did this? What's the journey of Eric Ong in terms of fantasy basketball articles, fantasy basketball leagues, and how did you uh, came from like maybe just a fan during your high school days or college days, and now you're into the fantasy basketball scene?
Okay, so my journey started all the way back in 2003 when one friend of mine, I'm with a group of friends who enjoy playing board games. I was playing board games back then. I know they're beginning to get popular nowadays, but I was already into that kind of thing back then. One night we were board gaming at the friend's place, and he goes, "Hey, we the conversation drifted towards the NBA, and he goes, "Hey, there's this game on Yahoo, etc., etc. It's called Fantasy Basketball." I go, What's that?" And it went from there. We were like, I think seven or nine managers only, just us friends, and it was my very first league. And uh, I was surprised that we didn't know what was happening. It was so much so that it was an auto drafted league that the system drafted for us, and I think I'll never forget it. It was extra special because at that time I got I was fortunate enough to get Dirk Nowitzki, and I won that very first inaugural league. And from then I was hooked. And every time we'd get together for those board game nights, we'd spend, time chit chatting over Coke and pizza, hanging out at the balcony of my friend's place, and we'll talk about NBA players. And Sean Marion is perfect because he has no flaws in his game, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. And we'd have a long conversation about it, so much so that our friends who are not into the NBA are just sitting inside waiting for us to finish chatting. And I guess 3 years later, I go, I wanted to do something of a project. I got into blogging. So I started my own personal blog about fantasy basketball because when I read about how to start a blog, they go, pick a topic that you're very knowledgeable about, etc., so you can create content. And I figured, if I can spend 2 hours just chatting with my friends about these NBA players, their stats, and how I can build teams around them, etc., then yeah, I figured I'd try it. And that was the start of my journey blogging. From there I joined another blog where with other two American bloggers who were doing it as a hobby. The name of the blog was called Give Me the Rock. At that time,
No.
Give Me the Rock was the biggest um, independent blog, not associated with, let's say, a big TV or entertainment franchise like ESPN, CNBC, CBS, etc. So we were the biggest independent blog out there because we would generate content on a daily basis. Unfortunately, after some time, because my friends who were doing that blog, they moved on because it was just a hobby to them. But I was still hooked and I still wanted to do it. Um, After that, I got some gigs writing articles for like sports. I guess wrote for Sports Illustrated twice, maybe three times. I did a how-to article here for fhm.com.ph, etc. And I collaborated with those same friends, and we wrote a book. It sold on Amazon or whatever, and thanks to them, because we were known in the industry about of writing fantasy basketball. I represented our blog one time, and I took up the slot representing the blog in the 30 deep. And there's this 30 deep, and for all of you who are listening and are unaware, there is this league that's held every year that's 30 teams deep, and every manager in that league is some kind of expert, or that's why I call it an experts league. It's everyone's either a fantasy basketball writer or a former writer, etc. So I joined there representing that our blog, and I got to stay because I on my first year I made the playoffs. So I've been in that league for like 7 years now, and I've made the playoffs six times, which is I
Nice.
think pretty good, and it speaks to the success that I've had. Um, and that's where I've encountered the likes of Aaron Brewski, Dr. A, Rick Kamla. I mean, I've played against those guys, people you read about, or whose content you absorb in the internet, in one shape or form. Um, Fast forward a few years later, after having tried to solo blog again, I found it difficult and wanted to give up. I stumbled on Hoopball. I found out that Aaron was no longer with Roto World. He used to be with Roto World when I first met him, and he went solo and he started his own thing here at Hoopball. And I went to the application section and I emailed him and I applied. Hi, it's me, Erik Ong. I hear you're looking for writers, and I was well received because he knew me already from leagues, and he knew basically that I knew how to play the game. I knew that how to write about the content, and from there I've been with hoopball ever since. And now I'm an starting from a regular writer analyst. I'm now an editor, and my job there is during is I watch the I oversee the writers who write during the games, and we blurb and we tweet, right?
Yeah.
Similar that you see on Twitter. So each time our hoopball accounts tweet about ongoing stuff or game recaps, it's done by a writer, and I'm overseeing those writers. So that's every day while the season is ongoing.
Mm.
And as of now, pre-season, before I've been busy writing a lot of articles because every year we come up with a draft guide, and that's one of our offerings here as part of our products. I've written several articles, and my latest article, which I'm happy to say, is a 16 team 9 cat head to head um draft recap, a real one, not a mock draft. This, it's it's 5,000 peso entry fee, so it's not small. It's people have an something to play for, and it's one of the more competitive leagues that I play in. And I recapped that draft, and I was able to post it, and that content is now available for our subscribers. So if you want, a lot of people are sharing, mock draft results, etc., etc. But here at Hoopball, I'm giving you real. I mean, these are real picks by real managers who want to win, right? So it's more useful information than what you would get as far compared to mock draft, because mock draft sometimes people mess around, people do meme picks, etc. But when there's 5,000 bucks on the line, you want to win, right? So, but the catch was, it was because I'm playing with this group of people who are, and I guess the best way to say it is in Filipino, they're so atat. They could not,
Yeah, for sure.
hindi nila, they could not wait, and we finished the draft before September, basically.
Wow.
So we finished something like just before September 1, and the draft was over. And now in the group chat, we're just twiddling our thumbs and waiting because they couldn't wait. So I'm not really fond of that. I don't like drafting too early because uh, that was before the Ben Simmons news, for example. So that was before the TJ Warren news. So
Oh, so
things
someone
happen.
drafted TJ Warren.
Someone drafted TJ Warren earlier than everyone
Oh,
else yeah, because I mean, you assumed that he was gonna be playing, but
yeah.
so we didn't know that he was gonna be out indefinitely, etc. And that news broke while we were in the middle of the draft. We were at the time Yahoo just opened, but we draft slow in a group chat on Facebook Messenger, and we picked that way. But there, so but the good thing about it is it gives me some insight. And these guys, with due respect to them, they're very solid in the sense that they don't follow the Yahoo ADP. They don't follow what you see. So when you say so and so is supposed to go here, okay, let's start to segue into the topic of centers. For example, Yusuf Nurkic, where does Yahoo have him? Something in like 60s, 70s, right? Something like that.
Yeah. Past
Yeah, but
mid.
yeah, he went in the 40s in our draft. So these people still project him as a top 50 bounce back guy. That's an example of content right there for you. Now, whether I agree or not, that's a different story. I think it was a tad early, and I think that he could have and should have gone a bit later than he did. But it's 16 teams with two centers, so you have to take into account the context of the scarcity of centers, and that's another topic that we'll probably be discussing in a while. So we have to fill two center slots, and Nurkic was one of the more common mid-round centers who's been a mid-round center for a lot of years now. Injuries notwithstanding.
Yeah, and he was actually highly drafted last season. People are drafting him in the second round last season as far
Yeah,
as
but
I
that was overkill.
remember. Yeah,
Yeah,
super overkill. People tend to do that when people are getting hyped by and the content that they see in the internet. So thank you so much. If you really want to follow our Erik Ong, is his Twitter handle is at Rotomancer, and then
yeah,
also
Rotomancer.
for
Yeah,
yep, and then there's also a YouTube content for hoopball. There's also something a podcast content by Dan Destries, care of hoopball. And then like what Eric said earlier, there's other Twitter accounts, actually two that I see. That's at Hoopball Fantasy and that's at Hoopball Tweet. So guys, if you really haven't seen or checked out these contents, you're actually missing a lot. You will learn definitely. If you're a new GM, this is gonna be solid for you. If you're an existing GM, a tenure GM, maybe this is the time you really try to step up and learn more. And how would a certain fantasy analyst would project a player compared on how you usually project. So that's gonna be a learning experience, definitely. Okay, so let's move to our main topic. By the way, for today's episode, we are going to talk about center. So, like what Eric said, this is something that people usually, tend to get as early as possible. I remember the first time I played fantasy. I don't know a lot of players, and then there were GMs that are uh, really racking up bigs to the point that in the mid round, I even don't know any players there, and then I don't have a center until round 10 or something. So it
oh
was a
no.
mess. So it's and then I guess I just learned how to play fantasy. I end up having like six guards. Luckily for me, those guards are well known and good guards to the point that during the actual season, I had a chance to do some transactions and trades to really convert that guard value into a center. Because if some GMs are really racking up a specific position in your league, I'm pretty sure it will skew the whole distribution, right? So it's gonna have like a different value in terms of trade value during the actual season. So let's see what the thoughts and takes from Eric in terms of the matchups that we have for today. So first off, it's going to be Carl Anthony Towns against Joel Embiid. Who would you rather have?
Ooh, I definitely go straight for Cat Carl Anthony Towns. Um, and it's very straightforward as to why. It's durability. Prior to last season, when he missed a lot of games because of COVID and his actual injuries, he was actually durable, considered one of the more durable centers before last season. So I think that he can return closer to his old form, and he was a top five draft pick mainstay in fantasy for like 3-4 seasons now, because of his solid, well-rounded stat line. That doesn't mean that Joel Embiid is, that he's better than Joel Embiid. I think on a per game basis, Joel Embiid is superior to Carl Anthony Towns. Statistically speaking, it's just that he started off his career injured. He's had constant knee problems hounding him, and he has missed so many games due to maintenance and load management. And especially if you're playing in the head-to-head format, when a missed game on a certain week by a key player. I mean, these two centers are first round draft picks in fantasy, and if let's say Joel, each of them have 4 games this week, they're matched up against each other, but Joel Embiid misses one game. He plays 3 instead of 4 because of load management or rest or whatever. uh, Obviously, Carl Anthony Towns would have the edge because he plays 4 games versus the 3 that Joel Embiid ended up playing. And that's, the short answer of why I would go for Towns over Embiid.
Yeah, and I remember the first three season of Carl Anthony Towns, he was highly touted that as the the new Iron Man of fantasy, as far as I remember. Another thing that I could say in these two centers are, they if you're drafting in the first round, usually the thinking there is who are the players that could really end up as the number one fantasy player for this season. So I guess these two guys has that capability. But of course, just to really kind of like defend the other dude here, Joel Embiid. In For my end, I think this is going to be a big season for Joel Embiid. He actually tasted how would it feel to be on top of the league, being an MVP candidate. I guess he's too competitive enough to the point that he wanted to win that specific award, and maybe that pushes Joel Embiid to play more games. Actually, his games last season aren't that bad because that's 51 games out of, I guess, 72 games, right? So, um, on how we perceive Joel Embiid, he might slide because people are really, are now very cautious about injured players. So in just alone, that's gonna be value for you, the ones who will end up getting Joel Embiid in the last part of the first round. Also, if you check out those players in the first round, there's just a few of them that can really influence your free throw percentage. So getting that influence from a center is kind of like, an add-on, because Joel Embiid really shot a lot of free throws with good percentages last season. He was actually racking up almost 8.5 uh, over 10 something. So for me, that's a great way to start off your team, especially if you wanted to really, polish and get some uh, bigs on the middle round, like maybe Capella or maybe other centers that doesn't really shoot well. So getting an Embiid kind of like really meshes that up in terms of having or maintaining a good percentage for your bigs. So that's my take. Okay, but
Yeah, I agree. I agree totally. And it's a common assumption. Well, not a common expectation actually that the average big man does not shoot free throws very well, and there are only a handful who shoot free throws well, and those particular centers are valued highly because they do not have a drawback in that statistical category, and that's why they're special. And in most cases, and just to add something for your listeners, the general impression is, it's centers are rare. There's this scarcity impression that it's so hard to find centers. To an extent, that's true because there's only so many fantasy viable centers. Let's say for a 14 team league that are playable, or who can provide quality fantasy output. What I do have to say, and based on my observations from the drafts that I've already participated in, and from my assessment of where players are being ranked this year, the spread is actually very good. Okay, you have, so let's say like two to three center eligible guys in the first round, maybe. After that, you have another four guys in the second round, and so on and so forth. It's not like um, point guards that the concentration is very top heavy. Now, after the second round, there's a drop off. Then the gap is really huge. The spread of centers, almost every round, you'll probably be able to pick up a center. So um, the situation of choosing position over value, which I do not recommend as a strategy. Pick value over position, and they will come around when you can pick your position to fill later on. Because, like what we were discussing, and from your experience, that people were grabbing centers because and this is something that happens during drafts, that a panic occurs. They're worried, they're fearing of missing out on a center. So they will reach, even though the centers who provide the appropriate fantasy value from the round that they're already drafting at, they're reaching. They're missing out on the value of, let's say, a shooting guard who will provide better value overall. So I'd recommend just wait. Go pick a different position if you have to. Um, and because the spread is good, you will be able to, let's say, find another decent, solid center maybe in round four, round five. You don't need to force picking centers, But as a rule of thumb, okay, I would probably suggest it would be nice if you could pick maybe at least one within the first 4 rounds. There, that's the general advice. If your league has two centers, get at least one within the first 4 rounds. That's a nice safe rule of thumb. Then you can get your second maybe later on in the draft.
I totally agree. That's the reason why, like, forwards like the likes of Chris Middleton and Tobias Harris, who are usually per ranking like ahead of a couple of good centers like Clint Capella, and maybe John Collins or Jonas Valanciunas. They usually drop. They have more value because people will definitely reach those centers, and you'll get those solid forwards on the value. Okay, and then earlier we were talking about solid free throws, right? Speaking of free
Yep,
throws,
yep.
this next matchup is well, specifically Bam Adebayo really surprised us. Me personally, I was surprised on how much free throw he was really taking last season. Maybe because Jimmy Butler isn't like available most of the games, but actually it was surprising how Bam Adebayo took a lot of free throws and he really have a decent percentages. And then he's gonna be against Nikola Vucevic, who has been a very very solid center for quite some time right now. If you wanted that efficient center that can provide a lot of stats and won't be like a top value like Carl Anthony Towns or Joel Embiid, then the next option that you have for sure is Nikola Vucevic. But now he is playing on a team that has several main man players as well. I think he's gonna be like their second main player for the Chicago Bulls. So with that said, how would you like assess this matchup? Would you have Bam or Vuce here?
Ooh. Um, Now, first of all, I'd like to say that I expect both of them to, take a slight hit this season compared to last, um, because of the changes to their teams. Bam, because Kyle Lowry is joining the Heat, and it'll affect the number of assists that Bam will be able to dish out. He used to be the secondary playmaker after Jimmy Butler, but with Kyle Lowry there, that's going to change things. And one of the biggest appeal that Bam has is his higher than normal assist rate for a center. It's as if that he's passing at the rate of, let's say, a good passing shooting guard, for example, or a low output point guard. Um, the same can be said also about Vucevic. He's going to take a hit because of the arrival of DeMar DeRozan, who's going to take a lot of touches in terms of scoring. So his points are going to go down, and also his passing. I mean, Vuce is an underrated passer. He's a decent passer actually from his days in Orlando, but those assists are going to go down because of the arrival of Lonzo Ball, and even DeMar DeRozan himself is transitioned his game, given his age, into a more supportive role. Instead of being a top scorer, he's passing a lot more, and Vooch won't be able to rack up 3.5 assists per game anymore. So those are going to go down. So his points are going to go down. And to answer the question, I'd probably still go with Vooch here because I think his 3-point shooting, which is I think like a 2.5 threes per game last season, that's still gonna be there because the Bulls need it, and he's still gonna get those rebounds, which he was a nightly 20-10 threat with good free throw, and he can occasionally give you a steal, occasionally give you a block. So he might not be a 20-10 guy. His scoring might slip down to 18 or 19 now, but still the efficiency will be there. So I'd lean slightly more on Vooch over Bam.
Nice, nice. And also, these two centers are also durable in terms of their historical game plays per season. So choosing anyone from this is going to be a value for you. But if just to really what I think for Bam is something. This was already mentioned by Eric on how he influences dimes as well. It's something that is at least you have like that mini Jokic in your team getting either Vuce or Bam here. But another stat that Bam really excels are steals. Getting steals from a center maybe really helps you out. Maybe part of the strategy is getting the usual wherein you're getting guards and then forwards, and then you're trying to get wings that snipes and steals at the end of the draft. At least you have Bam, wherein you already have that foundation of at least sure that you have steals already in your racking or someone that can rack up steals in your current lineup. So again, another thing that I love about Bam is despite playing the finals last season, he really played a lot of games despite of that situation. So it means how Miami is letting him play as much as he can whenever they feel he is healthy. He in fact did play in the Olympics this past month. So he isn't the player that Jokic was before, wherein Jokic were earned providing solid stats in the first few months, and then will eventually rack up stats in the middle of the season, right? So on the other hand, Bam doesn't have that history. He off the bat he can really provide that energy, what he usually does, and then being that lone solid main guy in the front court of Miami, who I think would definitely have a lot of pressure to win this season because their main players are kind of old. So that's something that also kind of pushes me that hey, I think they will definitely lean with their big three, which is Bam, Lowry, and Jimmy Butler this season. So meaning more games played, more minutes. They wanted to win, then maybe it will generate a lot of stats for us fantasy GMs. So that's my take for Bama de Bell. So this is gonna be something that you'll encounter during the rounds, especially if you play Yahoo, because they are not super far apart. The next matchup that we have right now are good rebounders. So if you'll end up missing those centers that doesn't usually provide blocks, then these two guys, especially Valanciunas, was really killing it, especially last season. Now these two were highly recognized last season during drafts to the point that Ayton were being picked like in the second round, and then people now turned sour on him because he ended up not providing a lot of stats. But during the finals and during the playoffs, he was actually big for the Phoenix Suns. So with that said, with the changes with Valanciunas from the Memphis Grizzlies to New Orleans Pelicans, wherein he has like better forwards, I guess, that could take away some rebounds. What do you think would be their value for this season? Because um, I, I see different takes for Aiton in terms of being drafted early or being sour that hey, I think Aiton only plays well during playoffs.
Okay. Yeah, these guys are trending in opposite directions as far as I'm concerned. Even though if you a lot of people look at last season stats and see that Aiton finished far from the second round zone that he was drafted, and were disappointed. But um, a lot of things that stuck to people's minds was his performance in the playoffs and the finals, for example, where he was a field goal generating monster, and solid free throw, reliable rebounds, and his blocks were actually coming along nicely. So from my experience and what I've seen so far, the sentiment is still very bullish on him. I've seen him go in the 20 to 25 range. So people are still want Aiton. Still think that they're hoping at the very least that there will be some carryover from the momentum that he was able to build during the playoffs last season, and take it into the regular season as part of his expected growth as a player, because he's still in the low 20s as a player. He's very young. On the other hand, you have this 30-year-old Valanciunas who saw his numbers get bloated with the Grizzlies because you know most of the season Jaren Jackson Jr. missed most of the last season. um, Valanciunas became the second uh, scoring option for the Grizzlies after Morant, and he thrived because he was the only reliable big man they had, um, and he was a 2010 threat nightly, and he shot you know free throws pretty well, so he had very very little drawbacks, and finished in the top 30 range as far as centers went. But now with the Pelicans, it's a totally different story. You have this phenomenal freak of nature in Zion Williamson that you're going to share the paint with sometimes, and he's just a monster. He's like the Hulk. You have to get away, or otherwise, titilapon si Valanciunas kung
Yeah, for
magkabanggaan siya.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a different story. I like Valanciunas because he's solid as far as his game. You know what his game is. You know what his style of play. He hangs out in the paint. He's actually grown to become a bit more um, competitive as a passing center because he's more mature. He shares the ball a lot more, and that's going to be helpful. But uh, compared to the last season, the outlook is not. I don't see him being a top 30 guy that he's going to drop definitely, and I think it's better to take him farther. So different directions, and definitely based on the sentiment of the people drafting, I think I'm on board. I would prefer to pick Aiton a bit later than 20 or later than 20 in that range, but that's where he's going, and he still seems to be like the popular pick. It's like he goes somewhere in the neighborhood of where Zion has been going. Valanciunas, on the other hand, is really a mid-round guy, while Aiton is still considered an early round guy. So it's pretty far.
Yeah, for me the best case scenario for Jonas Valanciunas here is if they will let Zion Williamson play that point forward type of a role for the New Orleans Pelicans, who I'm actually assuming would have like a faster pace this season with the change of the head coach. So maybe that you know kind of like help Jonas, because Zion will be coming like on top of the key, and then he as a very solid behind the basket type of big, then maybe they would isolate that. And then there will also instances wherein Jonas can really stretch out. He started really shooting and rocking snipes last season. We saw that not that much as like Vooch, but these international players are really killing the American players in terms of aside from Brook Lopez, who really adjusted their game. Maybe that's also the reason why people, not only people in fantasy but also in reality, really love what Jaren Jackson can do, because he's a big that can really rack up shots outside. In on my end, maybe he gets to be that splash mountain type like Brook Lopez. As like if ever Brandon Ingram or Zion takes that point forward role in the Pelicans. We're not sure because they got Devonte Graham. Maybe they love Devonte there, but and that's another incentive for me for Jonas Valanciunas, because I always joke about Devonte Graham, wherein I ask people that love Devonte Graham on what type of house would they like Devonte to build, because he's a brick city type of guy. Maybe Dillon and him could help out to build houses for for people, right? So if that's the case, as good as Valanciunas is as a rebounder, maybe that helps out Jonas Valanciunas. But then again, there's a lot of things that to be considered. This is gonna be a something that we should monitor preseason, how the new coach will impact these players, the pace, the new guards, because Lonzo is a very, very solid, fast-paced guard to the point that he really helps you out and racks up a lot of dimes. And without Lonzo, this is going to be a big change for New Orleans Pelicans. Something that I also think is New Orleans Pelicans is going to be aggressive to be in the playoffs this season. Looking at how they built their team. So uh, on the other hand, the Andrey Ayton, I'm one of those players that were excited last season with the Andre. I even really was, it was a fun league, kind of like not super serious, when I tried to get the Suns top three. I got uh, Devin Booker and Ayton back to back at the last round, and then got CP3 on the third round. But yeah, it was hard for me to see me losing every week after week because I have Booker and Ayton. So that happens. But I think DeAndre Ayton has that promise, that upside for sure, for sure. We all know that since his rookie days, he it's kind of weird because the only reason that I thought that this him not providing solid stats despite having a point guard in his side is his attitude or his confidence maybe, but that was really, that struggle was really clear during the playoffs. So that's our expectation. Maybe he can do that. Imagine him doing that on the whole regular season. So that's gonna be a different story for the Andre Ayton. Next up here, these are kind of like another for me players that people would reach when they forgot to drop centers down the line. People love players that blocks. I remember those seasons wherein people are drafting Drummond and DeAndre Jordan back to back. It's like kind of like a thing before, if you're the last pick, you're gonna draft those players. Now, when you end up not getting a big, at least in mock drafts, I'm really seeing Jarrett Allen being rich to the point that there's a lot of solid forwards and players still available, but Jarrett Allen is being drafted way too early. I
Like
understand the
like like how
upside.
early? Like how early? Around what picks?
Round 5,
Okay,
around
yeah.
that area, and
That's a
I
bit
do
early for
believe.
12 team. Yeah.
Yeah, there are several, there's still several options there. And then after in those areas, well, there's like center eligible players that you could rack up. You have PJ Washington in that area. You have Robert Covington at least. So for me, it's like taking the best case scenario for Fro here. We all love what he does, aside from the free throws, right? But on the other hand, you'll end up seeing Jakob Pertl available. So they're kind of like reverse. Wherein if someone from your team, from your league, like reaches with Jarrett Allen, for me, to be honest, in terms of clarity of the role and minutes, I'm really leaning more on Jakob Pertl. I think he doesn't have someone in the Spurs, like that would take out his role. How good he is as their defensive anchor. I'm not sure
Mhm.
that the new centers that they have are really has that defensive presence that Jakob Pertl has. Thing is, people hate Spurs, but for me, I'm a hardcore Spurs fan, and then people hate Pop, especially in fantasy, because I do understand how really Pop, caps the fantasy value of his players. But personally, I would rather have Jakob Pertl if I have like a chance, and I think we will have a chance to really get Jakob Pertl just in case, because people aren't really reaching out for Jakob Pertl. How about you, Eric? What can you say about these two centers?
Yeah, I think I think I'm on board more or less with what you've already said. There's Yeah, people are reaching for Allen because he's supposedly the center of the future of the Cavs, etc., etc. But they have a crowded front court actually, if you think about it. And I'm not even counting the waste of time that Kevin Love is going to bring to that front court. I'm talking about, they drafted a solid, well-rounded center in Evan Mobley,
Yeah.
and they got via sign and trade Laurie Markkanen, who I assume is going to play, starting power forward. Fine, he does not compete with Allen in the paint, but there's only going to be so many minutes to be shared by all of the big men, and they have, at least they were able to finally offload Larry Nance. I mean, it used to be four-way, five-way,
Yeah.
logjam. So yeah, I think the tendency is people are reaching for Allen way too much. I am a Portal fan. I think that you can also get him later than you would normally find Allen. And if all you're after is something like 9 rebounds and 2 blocks, you know, and solid field goal, and only a slight hit in your free throw if you have um, Okay, when you look at free throw, don't just look at the number. Okay, it may be in the low, let's say 60s or even in the 50s, but if his volume is low, and let's say you have a Lillard or a Harden as your early pick, it won't really hurt your team
Yeah.
because their volume is so high and they hit their free throws at a high clip. Somebody like Portal won't drag that category too much. So when you're planning or drafting your team, take that into account. So don't get too afraid of that, unless you've already punted that category and you don't really care. And at which case you should actually draft him a lot earlier because his valuation is worth more if you're already punting in head to head. So yeah, I'm with you. I prefer Portal a bit more. I think he has a lot less competition for minutes, and that's why.
Yeah, I'm super excited with Portal as well, especially on how I see people, value him. I think he's gonna save a lot of GMs uh, in those situations wherein you forgot to drop centers early. So at least you have Jakob Portal available there. And next up here are kind of like the old generation. One of the for me, the most skilled big that we have right now, Al Horford. He's actually the mentor of uh, Robert Williams. So it's gonna be fun to see them playing with each other this season. And this upcoming center that was mentioned earlier already by Eric, wherein he's also touted to be that kind of like skilled Chris Bosh, Al Horford type of a center. So this is something that is gonna of I think will end up choosing between how would we assume the minutes that these both players will play, because they really have competitions in their in the rotation, both of them. But do you think you would rather like have Mobley wherein he's really ranked higher than Al Horford, and then Al Horford on the other hand, it's for me it's kind of I still have a dilemma on how would I rank Al Horford. I would I can see him as a decent center still for the season, despite having that low rank. I think he will play more, especially that Boston isn't that good, to be honest. They really need as much of help as they can, especially on how they performed last year. So I think uh, Al Horford is gonna still play a big role in the Boston Celtics, to the point that he's gonna give us a decent amount of stats, and he is going to be a value pick down the line, because he's actually being drafted like round 12 or round 13 in several situations in mock draft. So what can you say about these two opposing era centers?
Wow. So we have an oldie and a baby.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's. One thing I'll start off with. Both of them are gonna give you headaches. Both, if you're gonna be drafting them, they're gonna give you headaches. You're gonna experience a bit of frustration. In the case of Mobley, he is a rookie, so even though he's projected to have a nice stat set, etc., he because he can shoot the three and block shots. Like I said, it's crowded in Cleveland, and that's
Yeah.
going to be a problem. And we don't know exactly how he's going to be able to adjust to play against bigger, stronger centers who, um, he might not be able to defend, and he will have to be benched by the coach. A good example of that is the other his front court partner in in the Cavs, and that's Jarrett Allen. I will never forget back when he was with the Nets, and he was supposed to be guarding Joel Embiid, and he was just useless, so useless that the coach just sat him, and it was like Atkinson, I think, who was still the coach at the time. He just benched him because he was just too useless and could not slow down Embiid. And because Mobley is one of the a lankier kind of big man. He's not really muscular, and
Yeah.
he needs to still work on his strength. So he will be hit or miss on certain weeks, but he's more of a dynasty guy that he's gonna be great down the line, but he might frustrate you in his first year. Now, going to our oldie here, top we could pencil in Horford as have a top 75 kind of ceiling if you're just talking about per game numbers, because he's a guy who can do it all. He can shoot the three, he's a great passer, he can block shots, he can steal the ball, he can rebound, and he's not a bad free throw shooter. It's just that he doesn't do all of those things at high volumes. So he does a little bit of everything. But he is very old. He's in, he's in the wrong side of 30, and he will definitely undergo, um, you know, load management, because if you are the Celtics, you want to preserve him and you will need him
Yeah.
for the playoffs. You don't want him to. You don't want that wear and tear of an 82 game grind of a regular season to impact him when you need him the most, because he's a smart player there, and that's what I have to say about Horford. He's a very intelligent, a big man who, and that's why his game has lasted so long, and that's why he's still productive despite his age. His fantasy game and the stats he produces, is very suited, so that because he's an across the board contributor, he gets value, but then he's gonna miss games, and that's also gonna be frustrating. And if I had to pick, I'd still probably lean on Horford, because even though there's a missed games here and there, I know what I'm getting because I have a history of what he produces statistically. Evan Mobley still has to show me what he can do. Yeah, yeah, you're supposed to be able to give me so and so stats, but I have no, um, you know, historical basis to show me that you are going to be able to do that in the NBA. Yeah, you had a nice summer league performance, but then that's with fellow young guys. What are you gonna do against the Joel Embiid when he's posting up on you? I don't know if Evan Mobley can guard somebody like Joel Embiid, for example, or even let's say DeAndre Ayton posted up against him. Will he be able to guard Ayton? No, you know, there's still a lot of question marks. So I'd lean on the guy I know, and that's Horford.
Yeah, and also you can actually get Horford like 3 rounds after Ayton or more in some leagues, depending on how would Yahoo updates the ranking. So it's gonna be a value there. Another thing that I love with this, at least with Al Horford, is you also have a PF eligibility. So it's something that depending on the league format, it really helps out those um, additional means for you to use him aside from just a center with center eligibility only. Okay. Now this is gonna be the battle of the the tower of powers, the anchors of punt builds per se. So I would like to really understand how do you differentiate Rudy Gobert and Clint Capella if you think aside from their health, because I think that's one of the main reason that people are trying, one of the main reasons that cuts the fine line between a Capella and a Gobert. But aside from that, I would really love to hear your thoughts about these two guys, because you can get Capella 2 rounds after Gobert unless otherwise someone is reaching for Capella doing that Gobert Capella back to back picks.
So you can actually, it doesn't have to be a competition. Yeah, if you like Gobert, you can get Gobert and Capella in your build. Let's say your draft is Giannis somewhere in the top 6. Then you go Gobert. Then in round 3 Capella, and that's your core first three
Yeah.
picks. And you win rebounds and blocks and field goal already. Then after those first 3 picks, you work on the other categories you want to chase. But those 3 categories are yours already from there. So, but yeah, you mentioned about durability. Capella has, a long-standing history of injuries. He was plagued by some Achilles soreness last season and the season prior. He's missed some time here and there, but he's a great shot blocker. It's the same as Rudy Gobert, the stifle tower, etc. Another reason, and it's something that some people might overlook, especially in head-to-head, the Jazz have a superior fantasy playoff schedule compared to the Hawks. So if if it had to be a choice between, if I could only choose one between Gobert and Capella, I'd still go with Gobert. Um, Again, he's proven to be solid. He was actually great in the Olympics for France.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. Uh, he's getting up there in terms of the age, but he slimmed down, and it allowed him better mobility. It allowed him to preserve his knees. But eventually, a slowdown will occur. But it's hard to go with a guy who's going to give you double double with more than 2 blocks per game and maybe 1 steal per game also. So yeah, definitely I'm more of a Gobert guy. Um, but I like both. I mean, they're similarly built. So if I want one, I'll probably go for the other. And if I have to reach for Capella immediately after picking Gobert, I probably would, because especially in head to head when you can punt certain categories. I go for that. Um, An alternative is Capella is somebody you could pair. Let's say after you went for Zion in round two. For some people who are punting, they go for Zion in round two. Let's say you go Giannis or Luca, Zion, Capella. Then you have one of each. You have a guard, a forward, a center, and you're punting free throw, for example. But you have a nice spread of upside in your young guys, and you have a solid. Yeah, okay. Here's the thing about blocks. At the end of the day, in weekly head-to-head, you know, um, format, it's just 1 point.
Yeah.
There's such a thing as overkill. I mean, getting both of them, yeah, you'll win. But because blocks are such a tightly contested category in the sense that you don't need too much. You can only There are only so much blocks that go around every week in the NBA. So having an elite shot blocker to anchor your team, I mean, you don't need both. You could have Gobert and let's say two other players who give you 1.5 blocks per game, later in the draft. You don't need two guys that give you 2 blocks per game. I mean, it makes it easier, yeah. And you probably won't need for center stats later on, but you have to ask yourself at the time that you're getting Capella, are you missing out on a quality guy that, you know, are you choosing Clint Capella of, let's say, over Tobias Harris? Well, I'd rather have Tobias Harris than Clint Capella, because of his more well-rounded numbers and overall better fantasy value, for example. But again,
And
it's about the build. In head-to-head, if you're filtering on a punt free throw strategy, Capella is actually ranked higher than Tobias Harris. Then yeah, go ahead, pick Capella over Harris. So that's an example of two guys who are similarly built, and it's not really an either or as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, and for me, like what Eric said, maybe in the third round, if you have your punting percentages in free throws, you have Yanis and you have Gobert already. Maybe you take someone like De'Aaron Fox because you know that you'll have like a portal later in the round. So maybe that's a good approach just to really preserve that value and ensure you won't miss up in other stats. And I really love how Eric really mentioned those overkills because sometimes I understand it's it's fun to see your team obliterate your opponent per week, but sometimes it isn't necessary. It doesn't really help you out. Maybe you're missing value and help in other stats when you do stuff like overkill approach when you're racking up players with the same stats on in terms of how they give stats on a weekly or daily basis. But before we move forward, something that I would like to ask, um, in terms of proto, who would you rather have here? Let's set aside health, maybe, because is the difference between Capella and Gobert is pretty much slim, even in Roto.
No, I'd still go for Gobert in Roto because of free throw volume. He's still a
Yeah,
lower volume shooter, and I can offset his poor free throw shooting more easily. Um, Generally, I would skip both of them in Roto. If I don't like punting um, in Roto, so poor free throw shooters. I mean, if there's anything, I would find a way to sneak in Miles Turner instead. I will get um, big men who, let's say, don't block as well, but then sneak in a Miles Turner somewhere, because Miles Turner's drawback as a center is that he does not rebound well,
rebound.
but he led the league in blocks last year, right?
Yeah,
He he was almost as good as Gobert plus Capella in
yeah,
blocks, right? So that's kind of the strategy. But to answer your question, I'd still prefer Gobert. Um, again, even though you say, well, health aside, you really can't put it aside, because yeah, you can offset missed games better in roto compared to head to head, but those blocks are not going to come back, in the sense that the games that, let's say, Capella will miss this season, you will not be able to find them on the wire, because it's
Yeah.
such a difficult stat to find. And that's part of why there's such a scarcity, so to speak, in terms of that kind of category.
Yeah, and speaking of like better options in Roto, I think this next matchup is for me is something that I would really check, especially on how your league values them. Like an example that was shared to us later earlier by Eric, because Nurkic could really have a value. We all know how skilled he is, but the problem there is how many games would he play. On the other hand, do you think people are already embracing how good Rashawn Holmes is? Because um, he's still being passed on, at least in mocks, in my observation.
Okay. Here's an example, and just to promote hoopball and uh, our team in the site. We've been high on Rashawn Holmes for 3 seasons ago. That's how advanced we were in scouting him, and he will crush Nurkic. That
Yeah,
I mean, Nurkic had a great bubble, small sample size of games where he was a crazy top 12, top 15 player, but after that he got injured, and he had um, some uh, health issues last season, some emotional personal issues last
yeah,
season that he had to deal with also. um Rashawn Holmes is simply sneaky good, and the reason why people pass on him, he doesn't score as much, and he's not flashy. He's You will almost never see a highlight of him being shared on Twitter. It's really rare, because he's a role player. He's just a workhorse. He's a blue collar guy. But what makes him special in terms of why we've liked him in hoopball, he actually shoots the free throws pretty well. He's not a
yeah,
great shot blocker, but he's a decent shot blocker. And the fact that he is shooting only fine. He only scores, let's say, 14 points. He scores in the teens, but he's shooting at a 60+% clip, and that's almost enough weight to influence your team's field goal. Um, so, but the bottom line is, Nurkic has a more well-rounded game. Nurkic passes the ball better, is better, has more threes in his arsenal, for example. So, on in terms of peak performance, they're playing at their best, no injuries, etc. Nurkic would probably come up with the more well-rounded line. But as history has shown us, he's pretty much borderline, if not already considered an injury-prone big man. I
yeah,
consider him pretty much injury-prone, and I'm wary, and I've downgraded him in my personal rankings a bit because of that. Holmes, on the other hand, yeah, it's just that, okay, you know, when you're looking for centers, sometimes in the new positionless style of the NBA, you're looking for centers who can shoot threes sometimes, right? So that's why you have the unicorns in Porzingis and Jaren Jackson Jr., those big men who shoot threes, and that's not part of Holmes' arsenal. And he's also not a great passer, unlike Bama Debayo, for example. He's it's tighter as far as the categories he contributes in, but he does them pretty well. And because he's not flashy, people tend to overlook him. But yeah, I cannot discount durability, so I'd go with Holmes over Nurkic. But I've seen them go in similar rounds, or sometimes Nurkic still goes ahead of Holmes because of the expected the sentiment that I've felt from the drafts I participated in, there's an expectation of a bounce back because people don't expect Nurkic to be as bad as he was last season. They expect some kind of bounce back. Now, whether he will bounce back to a top 40 guy, a top 50 guy, or a top 70 guy, that's we don't know which Nurkic will show up this season. And that's a question mark, and that's a question that will have to be answered probably in training camp and in the preseason. And we'll see from there.
Yeah, I agree. And then maybe a little thought of in my angle as well would be checking their backup centers. I mean, it's just a matter of really looking at Marvin Bagley versus Larry Nance Jr. or Cody Zeller. I think Cody Zeller and Larry Nance Jr. are more capable to the point that if ever they would want Nurkic or they would preserve Nurkic, they are more capable to do so. While on the other hand, Holmes is the best center there. The difference between the skills and his backup is super far. Unless otherwise, you really love the likes of Marvin Bagley and Tristan Thompson, which
No, I
I don't
do
know.
not like the likes of the
Oh,
dislike.
so for the next matchup, this is gonna be interesting. The this is gonna be a block party. The highly regarded Miles Turner, which you've already mentioned as the league leader in terms of blocks, versus an upcoming big that people are really cramming about, which is Time Lord. Because who wouldn't love Robert Williams? He block shots and he has one of the coolest nickname, Time Lord, which you can actually use in your fantasy league. So that's, I guess, psychologically speaking, it really entices people. But at the end of the season, who would you rather have, Robert Williams or Miles Turner?
Hmm. Okay. The thing about Miles Turner, the biggest reason why he was so amazing is because he had an unearthly amount of blocks. He took that blocking game to another level last season, so much so that he blew away the competition. Plus the fact that he actually is a decent free throw shooter. Now, if those blocks somehow go down a bit for whatever reason, um, his value will also drop. On the other hand, you have Robert Williams, who's like as you call him up and coming, and I see that, and people see that because he is one of the best per minute monsters in the NBA. That he is so productive given limited minutes, and people are going, free time lord, free RW3, etc., etc. All those hashtags because the sentiment is all the guy needs is minutes, and he's gonna
Yeah.
be a beast. But the thing is, he is deficient on the offensive end. Um, Unlike Miles Turner, who can actually still spread the floor with his own 3 point shooting. I think Miles Turner gives you at least 1.5 threes per game, something like that. It's not something in Williams's arsenal right now, at this stage in his career. So his scoring is limited to putbacks or easy lobs, etc. So he's limited in that aspect. Plus, um, being the younger player and still in development, Williams is working still in learning the game. I mean, he can get into foul trouble, and that'll spell, you know, a doom for his minutes played in that game. The moment you get into foul trouble, it's so easy to sub in Al Horford and problem solved. You still have a capable center, and the coach um, will not be in a hurry to bring back Williams. So yes, I see the upside, but people are so excited about Williams that I'm afraid that he's gonna get overdrafted. He's gonna be drafted too early. People are get the excitement will outweigh the eventual output there. So people are a bit too excited. Kind of like how the market is about Luka Doncic or let's say Zion Williamson. The hype is too much. The hype is too much. The excitement is too much. It's not really hype. It's more of excitement because I really think he can deliver if he will produce on a consistent basis. But we'll see how many minutes he gets and if he can get those minutes on a regular basis. So that remains to be seen. So I'd rather stick with Miles. I mean, um, I can get rebounds later. Something that from Miles does not rebound the ball. Almost he rebounds like a small forward or even a shooting guard. Hardly rebounds the ball, but he's a great shot blocker. And um, I think that he will be maybe still in the top two at the very least. Turner is going to be still in the top two, but I have one of my principles in draft philosophies that the fewer players that you need to lock down a certain category, the better. So if I were drafting Miles Turner, I will need less support in my build to win blocks than if I were to build around, let's say, Robert Williams. Um, but again, I what I like about Williams is he steals more than Turner, and that's the fact that he can do both steals and blocks makes him very tempting. And high field goal, good rebounds. Yes, yes. I mean, I can see the high. I can see the excitement. But yeah, and they're probably going in similar rounds. If you look at it, they're not too far apart as far as somewhere in the third round when people are panicking and they're grabbing centers. These are the two first centers that people will be reaching for when they
For
want to
sure,
chase
for
blocks.
sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So and they're it's almost impossible to own both of them, to have both of them on your team. So that being the case, this is a good head-to-head matchup that you put in front of me. And yeah, I'd probably still go with Miles.
Yeah. For me, I guess like what you mentioned earlier, that perspective of being a per minute monster of Robert Williams, having lesser competition this season in terms of the rotation, those out of position dimes that you can get in a center position, uh, really like entices me or pushes me to lean on Robert Williams over Miles just because of the upside. If I could get him in the round four, I guess I would pretty much take that.
Good
Like
luck.
like 7 days on a week. But like what you've said, good luck to me because people are super excited of getting Robert Williams. But on the other hand, I was really thinking on how would Rick Carlisle impact Miles Turner because he provides the similar value that Kristaps provides in terms of that position. And looking at how Rick Carlisle impacted the how Kristaps Porzingis provide value in terms of how he uses Kristaps in the past season, it's something that I'm like trying to figure out because I'm pretty sure Indiana will play slower compared to last season. Maybe if it's slower, how would the front court battle between Sabonis and Turner work out? Would Kyle really put Turner outside of that area and then let him shoot more snipes? So that's gonna be interesting to follow during this preseason, and I'm looking forward to it because for me it's somehow gonna define how we value players before the actual season because aside from the opportunities, the players, you have to really look at the coaches and the systems that they have. There are several instances wherein those are really impacting how players provide stats. So Indiana, Boston, they have both different coaches this coming season. So it's gonna be fun to watch what would happen for these two studs in terms of blocks. Next up, this is gonna be easy because technically value wise in standard leagues, I'm not sure people will draft them. But let's talk about like deeper leagues or maybe dynasty. Nick Claxton has been a murmur for quite some time because again for his ability to rack up stats, being that he's actually kind of like maybe mature is not the perfect word, but more of like he really understands his role to the point that when he's playing with KD, with Harden, especially with Harden, they really look good out there. But we started off, if you drafted like July or the moment that Yahoo was up, you would have like drafted Dick Claxton, but they got Millsap, and LMA is now also back in the lineup. And then on the other hand, with a very solid performance last season, Moses Brown isn't far off in terms of that upside. Me on the compared to Nick Claxton, it's more of like stats because when you watch the actual NBA game, Moses sometimes is kind of lost. He's just too big, and he doesn't have like much competition back in the OKC, so he racks up a lot of stats. So if you check the stats, you might assume they're kind of like similar in some sense. No opportunities, but can provide stats. But in reality, if you watch their game, Nick Claxton is way better over Moses Brown. So with Moses Brown being involved in that possible uh, Goran Dragic trade to go to the Toronto Raptors, um, is there any scenario wherein you see that either of these two provides fantasy value this season?
Deep leagues only. I mean, like you covered, Claxton was somebody that I would might have considered as a late round flyer pick, in standard leagues, as a last minute, um, quote unquote pahabol for blocks, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it's the outlook has turned very sour as far as I'm concerned, because Millsap, um, Aldridge, and as we saw, they even weren't shy in playing Blake Griffin at
Yeah.
center last season. So suddenly, from a guy that you would have seen brought in and play quality minutes off the bench, he falls down so far down the pecking order because of all of these veterans that were, you know, even though it's like an episode of The Walking Dead, they're already old and naagnas na naglalaro pa rin. So, um, but that's the support that the Nets needed around their big three. They, even though these are old big men, they're veterans. They know what they're
Yeah.
doing. They can do their role, and in that sense, Claxton does not fit because he's the young up and coming future. So maybe just keep him for like dynasty in the future. I think he has a bright future ahead of him. This year, not so much. He's not gonna get much um, opportunities. And even and Steve Nash already said, younger players get ready because you won't get that much minutes. The focus will be on the veterans. The focus will be on him mastering that rotation that they will hopefully carry over into the playoffs and crush it, because they're hoping to crush it, because um, in the end they had a disappointing
Yeah.
output in the playoffs. People expected them to go much farther than they did, and of course, yeah, we can talk about the hamstring injury to James Harden, etc., etc. I mean, their big three never got to play well. I play together uh, in enough games to really see what they can do, but the the big men that they added as role players really pours water on the on the candle I am holding for Nick Claxton. I'm sorry. Um, Going to Moses Brown. Assuming he still stays with the Mavericks. Okay. The problem with Moses Brown, he busted out onto the scene with the Thunder and surprised a lot of teams with his athleticism and his power, etc. But you will have to realize that after a while, the coaching staff of the other teams caught on to it and were able to
Yeah.
defend him better. Then his stats dropped. Okay, he had a string of monster games. Then it dropped really nasty to the point that he Brown was a drop in a lot of leagues. So he the secret to Moses Brown was in his surprise factor last season, and he does not have that anymore because the league knows, Moses Brown will do this, Moses Brown will do that. So I'm not high on him. I'm not, you know, not even in Dynasty. Uh, I'm not on board with what he was able to show. I'll need to see more. I'll need to see him really step it up, and he will need to really improve on other aspects of his game. He'll need to commit to studying the game and studying better centers, um, and improve on his game before I I can trust Moses Brown.
Yeah, I agree. Like what you've said, the moment OKC got Tony Bradley, after a couple of games, Tony Bradley was, getting more run over Moses Brown,
Overshadowed
right?
him, right?
Yeah.
So
And on the other hand, I'm really excited for Nick Claxton and their young rookie Cam Thomas, maybe 3 to 5 years from now, because I really think these two guys will be the future of Brooklyn Nets. If Because majority of their vets are, good for a year or so, like tops. So yeah, in Dynasty, I would still be interested with Nick Claxton as well.
yeah.
And then let's go to the because I haven't really played fantasy basketball like with a lot of years. I This year is gonna be my 10th year of really playing fantasy basketball. So I haven't really compared to other GMs and other fantasy players who really played since their high school or college. I was actually able to play fantasy during my work days, my first stint in the IT industry. Shout out to my best friend Chris Penos, who really thought that I would love this game, and rest the rest was history because I really love the game. But during those days, I always remember these two centers being drafted. That hey, you should draft if you punt free throws, draft DeAndre Jordan and Andre Drummond. I remember those days, but those days are gone right now. These two guys really dropped from being that top 50 players to I don't know top 200 players right now. My question now is who would you rather have in terms of that flyer center to maybe help you out in your leagues this season? Because both are going to be backups, but maybe Drummond is enticing to the point that what if Embiid goes down? So maybe Drummond has better shot. But DeAndre Jordan, despite having like other centers like Dwight in the lineup, if AD goes down as well, maybe he gets more minutes. Basketball wise, I'm thinking at the Andre being like a better player in some sense. Skill wise, in terms of fantasy, maybe Drummond can provide more stats over the Andre. But what's your thought about this, Eric?
Um, yeah, it's easy for me. It's called pass and pass. No, thank you. Um, but just to talk a little bit about them, it's weird because Andre Drummond is not that old. He's not even 30 yet.
Yeah,
So he's still in his 20s, and he's an example, guys, listeners, of how um how much it matters what team a player is on. When Andre Drummond was the main man with the Pistons, he was a crazy double machine with elite blocks and steals.
steals. Yeah,
So he was a beast in punt free throw builds. But now, after a sucky stint with the Cavs and an even suckier stint with the Lakers, he finds him in a sucky situation with the Sixers. Uh,
with
to
Embiid, that's super funny because he's
exactly.
playing.
So um, I think his best case scenario is like what you said. If Embiid goes down, but you're gonna have to wait for Embiid to go down. And on days that Embiid is playing his 30 plus minutes, or I mean, I guess the thinking here is people are hoping that they're gonna dial back on Embiid's minutes. But this guy, like you said, is after MVP. He
Yeah,
wants to dominate the league and win a championship. And he's gonna play as long as his knees don't bug him. And on those days that his knees aren't bugging him, Andre Drummond is not going to give you value at all. He's going to play fewer than 15, 12 minutes. It's not enough for there's not enough juice for him to do his thing. So it's better to just keep him on your watch list and grab him instantly if Embiid goes down. But to carry the burden of a non-performing, or sorry, on a poorly performing center just because he's a handcuff for Joel Embiid is not worth it, especially if you're playing in a league that has daily roster changes. his slot is almost a dead slot in
Yeah.
shallower leagues. So pass and pass. So he's somebody worth picking up. Of course, when Embiid goes down, and history has shown that Embiid can disappear for a while if his knees act up, and that's the only time it's that Drummond would be worth it. But on a regular redraft, no, I wouldn't touch either of them. I mean, DeAndre Jordan is so bad that the Nets played Blake Griffin over him,
Exactly.
and Blake Griffin is you know not a shot blocker. The joke before is that he's a matador. He just lets the bulls through. He lets the guy charging him through, and pinapadaan lang niya. And and despite that, the Nets just didn't play. Oh, it could have been an issue, let's say a fit, or it did not gel well with how the big three performed, etc., etc. But you're just putting him alongside another big three in the Lakers. He's not gonna fit there either, and he's not gonna have enough minutes to matter in fantasy. So pass and pass. Sorry, guys. Unless you're in a very very deep league, let's say the 30 deep experts league that I'm playing in, I'd consider them as backup, and I wouldn't even put them in any of my starting slots.
For sure, for sure. Maybe Drummond as well, because if you're in a super deep league, you that's the time you think of like possibilities that that player could provide value, right? So at least Drummond has that, possibility that like what we've been talking about. If Embiid goes down, he could provide value. So this next slide is going to be a position battle per team.
Mm.
I'm pretty sure this is gonna be like some of them are pretty clear, but it would still be interesting to check out your thoughts about them. So, for example, the New York Knicks. Well, any team that Tibbs coaches is an enigma for me in terms of how he plays certain situations wherein a player is younger and the player is like kind of like tenured. So, for example, this one last season he was playing a lot of Nerlens Noel. So people are really hyped with Nerlens Noel. Come the actual season, well, Nerlens get an injury, yes, but he didn't actually play a lot of Nerlens initially. So that that really sucked for people who drafted Nerlens. And then on the other hand, Mitch Robinson gained some momentum. So people were down on Mitch because well, it's Tibbs, but there was an instance back in the mid-season last year wherein Mitch was actually performing and staying more in the court, not having those games with high personal fouls, right? But unfortunately, he actually was injured, and then Tibbs went down to Nerlens and well. Taj Gibson play more in their front court. So with that said, this coming season, wherein they've actually proved their point that hey, Knicks is really got better. Props to Tibbs, props to the New York Knicks. They're someone who will be definitely be part of the top 8 in the East. At least looking at how all of the Eastern teams, improve their rosters. But would you rather like draft Nerlens Noel as your one of your last flyer picks because he might still have those minutes, or are you still kind of like buying Mitch Robinson's value? Because Mitch Robinson was Robert Williams years ago. People are seeing. I mean, me personally, I see it that way. People are cramming for Mitch Robinson's years back, right? So maybe it's the best time to draft Mitch Robinson because people are now, letting him uh, drop rounds like after the mid rounds.
Okay. Me, I'm a guy who, when he gets burned by an injured player, or a player who gets injured, and I lose my season because of him, I tend to be really sour about it. So, but from the research that I've been doing, and from the updates on Robinson, is that he bulked up. He really hit the weight room hard this off season. He gained so much muscle. He's a lot bigger than he was last season. So he's gonna have a lot more power. and hopefully with all that extra muscle around him, that he's going to be able to um, handle the getting banged up in the paint more than he used to. So I think there's a shot at the bounce back season from Mitch Robinson. And I think some people there's a minority who see that, while others would prefer to stay away. Like me, for example, I'd prefer to stay away. He's not on my do not draft list, but if he falls far enough, yes, I'll pick him up. Um, at the end of the day, I think mostly both centers will end up still in a projected timeshare. There will be, whether or not Mitch Robinson gets into foul trouble or not, there will be a pacing of his minutes so that he's not um, overly tired, because Nerlens Noel is a very capable shot blocker. I
Yeah.
mean, he had like 2 blocks per game with 1 steal per game. He's a great defender. Um, but again, similarly, both big men are deficient when it comes to offense. But for offense, you don't care because you have Julius Randle to handle the front court offense. And these two guys are just supposed to block, rebound, and block and run. That's it, right?
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I might roll the dice on Mitch Robinson. But Nerlens, okay, just because Mitch Robinson is healthy coming into camp, coming into the preseason, and just because, yes, he bulked up, etc., that doesn't mean he's not going to get injured. I mean, he's on my list of players that I categorize as injury prone. So I wouldn't mind drafting Nerlens Noel in late, even as a block specialist. Even just if his blocks fall down to, let's say, 1.5 or 1.6, I'll take it. And if he gives me zero point 0.8 steals per game, I'll take it, because he's just there for 5 rebounds, six rebounds, maybe 5 points. That, and those two other defensive stats, it's okay, because he doesn't generate turnovers. He doesn't. He actually shoots at a crazy 60 plus percent field goal. So yeah, it's not bad. But I think Mitch Robinson, bounce back. But I'm hoping I'm in leagues where people are wary enough about him that he will drop and I can get him at the right time. But I'm not gonna burn um, an early pick for him. I'm not gonna pick him within the top 50. There, yeah, he has a 30, top 40 upside, right? So
Yeah.
if I get him in the 60s, 70s, better. But if he doesn't fall to me there, I won't cry over it.
For sure. For sure. And speaking of upside, this time let's talk about name value, because Harrell has been, you know, one of the favorites for some reason of, like, at least more than the majority of the people, maybe because he won a six-man award. But he's going up against a very fantasy friendly center, which is Dan Gafford. Thing is, with the new coach for the Washington Wizards, um, would you think Harrell will play over than Gafford, given that majority of their centers aren't like it like doesn't provide defensive value aside from Dan Gafford. To be honest, for in the whole lineup of the Washington Wizards, I think only Dan Gafford plays a solid defense, to the point that if I were the coach, I need him to be always present in the lineup. But well, that's gonna be different because they have Thomas Bryant when he's healthy, who is more capable offensively, and then they also have Harrell, where I don't know how people in the NBA really projects him.
Um, yeah, okay. I see people getting kind of excited that Gafford is expected to be the starting center. Um, they expect to see a nice little improvement on his end now that he does not need to compete with Robin Lopez and, who was that, Alex Len, I think, last
Yeah,
season, and in that ugly three-headed situation um, last season. But at the end of the day, what is his upside really? He's gonna give you 7 rebounds, 2 blocks. He's gonna be a crappier Nerlens Noel because he won't steal as much and he shoots free throws more poorly than Noel does. Um, at but um, Trez, on the other hand, despite being in a weird logjam situation in the Lakers, still was fringe value at certain points, especially when AD went down. He was able to see quality minutes off the bench, and I think yes, Gafford will start. Harrell will come off the bench, but Harrell is somebody who can produce on the pick and roll. I am excited to see what he can do in the PNR with either Dinwiddie or Beal or both, and that's going to be awesome. I think that he can become a 16 to 18 PPG kind of guy. Yeah, maybe just 7 points, and he's not going to block. Maybe zero point 0.8 to 1 blocks if you're lucky per game. But he's going to score at a decent volume, but at a high efficiency from the field. And last season, he actually improved his free throw shooting. For his entire career, he's a below 70% free throw shooter. Last season, he shot 70%. So his free throws were starting to fall. Now, if those free throws, let's say, improve to 75%, then what is Trez's drawback, right? So I think that he can be a fantasy bounce back guy. Um, but unfortunately, the trend right now is that people are seem to be more excited about Gafford because of blocks. They want to see him do those 2 blocks per game, etc., etc. Um, and they're not high on Trez because he doesn't block. And again, it's this obsession with blocks. But uh, Trez, if lucky, can swing field goal for you, which Gafford will not do because he doesn't shoot enough volume to do that.
Okay.
And Trez can, especially if the Wizards, who I think um, they led the league in pace last season, and they're gonna run, you know. So we're well, fine. They led the league in pace because a lot of it had to do with Russell Westbrook pushing the pace. But I think they're still gonna run. I think Dinwiddie is somebody who can also push the pace and make the Wizards run. And when you're a team, okay, and we've seen this in even your local um quote unquote village basketball. If your talent is not as good, what do? You run, right? You do the
Yeah.
throw inbounds pass and fast break, right? You rely on pace. So I think that that's what the Wizards are gonna do. They're gonna run as fast as they can and hope Bradley Beal can cover their shortcomings. So there's a chance Harrell can bounce back, and I like that. I between the two, I'd rather own Harrell.
Nice, nice. I really love this because I haven't really heard some optimism for Harrell, and then really listening on how you see it gives me that perspective that I wasn't really able to validate and check out in terms of the possibility. So I really love that take. Um, Speaking of like another player that people love, especially the stats that he give, let's talk about the water boy, Chris Boucher, who was is who really kills people because people are really expecting a lot from Chris Boucher. I love Chris Boucher. I really believe is a solid player, but I don't love his coach. So that's that's my thing about his case. And then for some reason, that specific coach as well might kind of like love Kem Birch because looking at how the minutes were distributed, and Kem Birch as well is like a hometown player for the Toronto Raptors. Do you think there's a chance that Kem Birch overtakes Chris Boucher? I would understand that initially, when the season starts, both might definitely give you value because Pascal Siakam isn't healthy yet. But once they're healthy, I'm really am curious on how would they play their these two bigs.
Okay. Yeah, you hit it on the nail in the sense of the highlight of the Pascal Siakam injury, and Siakam is projected to miss at least the first 2 months of the season. Um, I don't think it's an or. I First of all, I see Boucher more as a power forward and not as a center. Even though in Yahoo he's center eligible, I think that what's gonna happen is he's gonna play more of a power forward, and as far as his stat set goes, he can shoot threes and he blocks very well, and he shoots free throws, at a reasonable clip. And the way I label him mentally is I consider him as a poor man's Miles Turner, because you can get threes, you can get blocks, low TOs. The rebounds aren't so great, but he has few drawbacks. But the difference between the gap between Turner and Boucher is, Turner has proven that he can do his thing more consistently. Boucher was, great on explosive games, then suddenly he disappears, and that's why, as you said, he gave fantasy managers a lot of headaches last season because of his inconsistency. But he'll have 2 months to show that he will be more consistent this year, because he'll have a lot more playing time on his hands. Uh, Birch, on the other hand, he the upside is limited. There's only so much that
Yeah.
Birch can achieve, regardless of the minutes, excuse me, given to him. So it's not close, and it's not really, you know, um, a positional battle per se. I don't think they're competing with minutes so much anymore, because I think Boucher, the situation when Siakam comes back is he might push Birch, Birch's minutes, and you'll have Siakam at the five, Boucher at the four in some situations, or interchangeable for both guys.
Got it. Because people love Birch because Birch helped them last season down the stretch, and people tend to remember those players, like for example Malachi Flynn, those players that really played well in the playoffs of fantasy, but they kind of like uh forget why that situation happened for those players. It's because a lot of players are resting. Some players are injured. So if they're checking the values or the stats in some sites or even in Yahoo, that might not be true in terms of the actual thing that's gonna happen when everyone gets healthy. So yeah, definitely, I definitely agree on that. Another position battle here is Mo Bamba and Wendell Carter Jr. Um, are you a fan of Wendell Carter Jr.? Because Wendell Carter is like one of the players that people love and then people hate, and then there were years wherein Wendell Carter and Laurie Markkinen are like darlings of some of the GMs because of the possibility that Wendell Carter can play like a Al Horford type of game, and then they were comparing Markkinen with Dirk Nowitzki of some sort, but that hasn't really materialized back in the Chicago Bulls. I remember Wendell Carter tried to shoot a lot of snipes last year, and then ended up stopping it after a couple of games because he was not hitting it. Not to make fun of Wendell Carter, but it just shows that he isn't like a vet as of the moment. He's still finding his way in the NBA. But on the other hand, Mo Bamba has that upside ever since. Thing is, he's still raw as well. There's despite not being like a team that a sure team that will enter the playoffs, and they don't have anything to really play on. The coach last year didn't even play Bamba until like the last part of the season. Maybe there's a reason why. Maybe it's because of his raw plays. But what can you say about these guys? Because they have a new coach now. They're younger. They don't have anything to really play for. Would they allow Bamba be try to materialize its upside, or would they like develop Wendell Carter because of the skill set that he has, and a different. They kind of like the same because they could stretch the floor. The only difference that I see here is Wendell Carter's ability to pass, and then Mombamba is kind of like more superior in terms of defense as well.
Okay, so this is what's going to happen with the Magic. Uh, yes, initially we're going to expect to see tight competition between both big men. But what's going to happen, and as you said, this is going to be an assessment season. This is going to be a do or die season for Bamba. in terms of whether he will be considered as part of the future core of the Magic, and they're gonna see what they have um, in him. And he broke. He actually he has a very slow start to his NBA career because of playing so few minutes and being very limited due to multiple injuries. But when he finally broke through and broke out, over a small sample size, he was able to show the upside of why he was like a top five pick when he was drafted in the NBA. Um, he's, yeah, like you said, the better defender. I think he's also the better 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
But from my assessment and from the research I've done, the issue with Bamba is not that he's raw. The issue with Bamba is his motor. That's his
Mhm.
ability. Sorry, kumbaga sa Tagalog, yung hangin niya
Yeah.
as a player. He can only he's only good for short spurts. He'll play well in those short spurts, pero he does not have staying power to play. Hindi siya pwedeng babad, kumbaga,
Yeah.
right? And that's something he will still need to work on, and he's fallen behind. Now, Wendell Carter Jr., on the other hand, he was also had a very injury prone start. Remember that these guys are from the same draft class,
Yeah.
right? So they were picked, both of them in the top 10, I think, yeah. But Bamba was selected first. But you see from his upside that he has, odds are, the higher ceiling between the two. But right, the motor is something that is not easy to develop. It's more than just cardio. It's more than just it's your ability to just keep on going. Like, let's say for example, somebody like Harrell is a guy with a good motor. I You've been playing long enough, and a guy that's sheer motor almost, but lacking in quality skill is Kenneth Farid. You
Yeah.
still remember Kenneth Farid?
Yep. The
He's a guy that's
manimal.
pure motor, right? He's just he'll run the court, and he's, but skill wise, he's not there. He's raw. He's
Yeah.
forever raw, but he's pure motor, and that's something that Bamba, he has a skill set that can be refined into something great, into something that potentially become a unicorn. But you can't become a unicorn without the motor to have that playing time. Um, Again, similar to the situation in the Wizards and in the Knicks, these two centers might be in a timeshare situation, um, because they will have to allot X number of minutes to Bamba to see what they have in him, because you won't see what you have in him if you don't play him enough, right? Uh, because they might let him go after the season. They might move on, maybe trade him at the deadline, because if they wanna um, not wait on his development and try to find a different big man, because um, Wendell Carter is also inadequate as an as a franchise center. He's more as a second string center as far as I'm concerned. He's a quality second string center, but he's not a franchise. He's not a. He will never become a Joel Embiid or a Carl
Yeah, for
Anthony
sure.
Towns. Yeah, you know what I mean? He's he's a much lower tier guy. And now to finally answer your question, who do I prefer, given the situation? Uh, I'd still go with Bamba. I'd go with that guy with the higher ceiling, and I'm just hoping that he develops the motor. I'm hoping that he will develop a certain sense of urgency, knowing that it's a do or die season for him in Orlando, and that he will play his heart off. He'll play his butt off and really, hit. And it took him a while to be at an NBA ready level conditioning, because that's how far behind his motor was compared to an average NBA player. But he was able to play really, he um in one of the leagues that I play with, Aaron Brewski, Mo Bamba was a pickup of mine, and he helped me beat Aaron Brewski in an 8 cat roto league where I won $1,000. So
Wow.
that was nice, and it was between me and Brewski to the very end that we were the top two teams. And my key pickup of Bamba late in that, I mean, I guess that's there's a bit of bias, so some transparency here. That yeah, I have a little bit of a soft spot in my heart because Bamba did help me, cash in that big win. Um, but yes, go if you have a chance of going for the higher upside guy, and it's late in the draft anyway, go for the higher upside guy. I noticed that Carter is being picked ahead of Bamba
Yeah.
because they expect Bamba to play, limited minutes, etc., etc., etc. And I can understand that because of his lack of motor, as I said. But um, the Magic will want to see what they have in him and to see if he has potential to be. Um, because it's I'm not gonna forget that there was this summer league. I think it was the first or second summer league. I think it was the first summer league of Bamba that he was able to play in. He played alongside Jonathan Isaac in summer league, and it was crazy scary. They were both bouncing up and down, and they were an unstoppable duo of athleticism. And that's still a potential monster combo that the Magic might be able to harness and see if Bamba and Isaac can play off each other, and that'll be a scary. I mean, if you look at the ceilings of both of those players, and they both play to that level, the Magic have a bright future ahead of them because you have Jalen Suggs, you have Chuma Okiki, they have a nice core building, but the question, it's still a question mark for Bamba, and we're gonna have to see. So, but upside, let's go for upside, go for Bamba.
Agree, agree. And then I really love that, tandem of Isaac and Bamba. Isaac
Yummy.
is a pretty monster, and I really hope Isaac gets healthy. That goes as well with Bamba to be like, really have that motor. Because I remember Ayton last season, that was like the initial problem of Ayton, that there were
One of
there
them,
were
yes, yes.
reports, right, in the first few weeks, wherein he was really breathing like a donkey based on the reporters. That's the reason why he really started slow. Speaking of like upside here, this is going to be tricky in my perspective. I'm not sure with yours, because OKC has this history of really playing vets very well whenever they got them. You had CP3, of course. You had well, let's put in Dennis Schroeder there. Let's put in the Italian cock, Danilo Gallinari, Al Horford last season. And then we all know that Derek Favors really provides value given the minutes. Ever since he was drafted by the Utah Jazz, he's always within the top 50, because he has the ability to block and has the ability to steal as well in high rate, to be honest. But Isaiah Roby, on the other hand, really showed us how versatile he is. He can shoot threes. He can actually pass. I remember there were games that he was, giving up a lot of dimes. So with that said, do you think this season will OKC also, like, use Derek Favors initially and then maybe trade him, and then that's the time Roby blossoms? Or do you already see them like taking half of the minutes off the bat?
Okay. Yes, I see them using Derek Favors early, and yeah, a lot of people might be surprised that because he's been in the league for so long, that they might be surprised that he's not in his 30s yet.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, but the sad part and the sad truth about Derek Favors is his knees are that of a 40-year-old, and they've been bad. They've never. It's how do I say this? Derek Favors' knees are chronically bad. So there's a reason why the Jazz had him play limited minutes um, back when he was with the Jazz. It's because his knees cannot take it anymore. Unlike his game, unlike Al Horford's, when Al Horford was thriving with the Thunder last season, Horford's game is, durability friendly, fantasy friendly. Favors, on the other hand, cannot bang with other big men anymore. His knees will not be able to take it. Um, Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, Isaiah Roby is all knees. He's very dependent on his athleticism, his his leaping ability, etc., etc. But skill wise, he still has a long way to go. Yeah, yeah. Roby has a long way to go, but he is somebody who is worth developing. So at some point, yeah, Favors might have a nice start to the season, but if I was the Thunder, I would do what I did with Al Horford or with any vet, trade him for picks.
Yeah,
Since
for
they're
sure.
collecting all the picks for the next 10 years, right? That's their plan. They want to monopolize the draft. So highlight him. I mean, let's face it, he's not going to be part of their long-term plan. And they've been very consistent that they want to focus on young players because they're tanking. They don't want to play too well anyway, right?
Yeah,
So, no, I don't trust Derek Favors' knees. So, even though at the start he'll probably outperform Roby, in terms of the long term, I don't like the number of games I foresee Favors missing, and he is a very strong, assuming he is not moved, he is a very strong shutdown candidate, like what they did with Al Horford. That
yeah.
they just said, okay, sorry, dude, we want to play Roby because he's a younger guy and we want to see our younger core run, and you can't run because your knees suck. I mean, of course, they're gonna say it much nicer than that, but sorry, Derek. Thanks, but have some Gatorade. Diyan ka lang sa bench. So so definitely, I'd rather have Roby than Favors.
Yeah, and but do you think Roby is someone that um OKC might invest on like as their future center?
Not long term. I think his ceiling is still very limited because if they have so many draft picks, they don't care. If they right, he is their current best option there, but those options will be fluid and will change year on year depending on who they get, right? So if things will change. For example, next season, if they somehow luck out and get Chet Holmgren or Paulo Blanchero, next season the draft class is big man heavy. So
Yeah,
given the picks of the Thunder, they will almost surely get a solid big man, right? So the quality of the big men there easily um, beat out Roby's skill set and what he brings to the table. So for now, yeah, he's their best option as far as young guys. But all it takes is a better draft pick to push him down the pecking order.
for sure. And then maybe that time they will trade Roby because he already had a good resume or a good season before the actual draft, right? So
No, he's okay. I like him as a reserve. He's a solid reserve that he can come. He's an energy guy. He'll give you that athleticism off the bench. It's just that he won't be your long term starting center.
got it, got it. Wow, that's if you really want to check the perspective on the centers, those three slides of us discussing several players is gonna be gonna help out our GMs here. So I hope you really check out this episode. And then before we really wrap up this episode, let's see Eric's perspective in terms of trends for these specific players. We won't end our session without talking about the best big as of the moment in the league, right? So let's talk about Nikola Jokic. We all know what value he gives, but is there another gear for Jokic to really trend up?
He's in the middle of his prime. There's still room for a little bit of improvement. I mean, but he's just playing so phenomenal. It's hard to picture him playing even better. But I think there's still. I mean, he's still. Um, there's still some room for him to get better. I don't think. I mean, if you're talking about green arrow up versus red arrow down, I'll definitely have to say green arrow up. It'll still be more of the same. And if there is an improvement, it'll be incremental and not so much. It won't be huge like the way he exploded last season, but it's still on an upward trend. I don't see him. Um, I mean, the worst case scenario is he plateaus. That's just the worst, and he'll give you a rerun of last season, which is enough to crush your league. So,
Yeah.
yes, upside, still up, positive.
And he also bulked up this season there were pictures of him circulating in the internet wherein he is actually buffer now. So it's something that, kind of like optimistic, and maybe, he gets more physical because he's one of those players that really plays physical as a center. Next up, I really like this rookie to the point that I think there's a chance wherein the Rockets might end up, not investing on Christian Wood. But do you also see that possibility? Because Sengun is a really good player. Maybe trending up or trending down isn't like the best way to gauge him. But how do you see Sengun?
Um, okay, I like what I saw from summer league. I like what I saw from the scouting reports, and I used to cover international basketball. So the Turkish league that he plays in, aside from the Euro League, the Turkish league is one of the most competitive national leagues in Europe, and winning an MVP there is no joke because they have solid um, imports from the US. Also, so he's competed with against some former NBA players or low tier um, players from college who did cut it in the NBA, but he won it before he was 20. So there's a lot of upside there, but um his body is not gonna he plays in the paint even though he's a bit undersized, and because he is able to rely on his skill set. He has a fantastic skill set,
Yeah.
but his body needs to bulk up a bit more. I like him. I like him as a future um I don't know, somebody like a Domantas Sabonis type with better blocks, because he can pass the ball really well. He's crazy. He has a crazy number of moves in the low post that he can pump fake, and he's got finesse because he's not a pure brute force kind of big man, and he also can't anyway because he doesn't have the body for it. So he relies on intelligence and finesse. So and on your point about the question mark about Christian Wood being the main thing of a main big man for the Rockets in the future. And that's something, again, it's like the case of the Magic. The Rockets will see. The Rockets will probably give Shingun enough time to see what they have in him. Um, of course, they'll obviously give Christian Wood a lot of time. Um, but I don't want to put any answers now, and I'd rather um, check out the preseason, and I want to see how they're using him, because you still have Daniel Tice
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
And it's not an easy situation. So even though Shingun is not as tall um, as a lot of centers, he plays center, and and they're gonna be uh, maybe moving Tice to play power forward alongside him at times. It's gonna be a potentially messy rotation, and people are putting weight on Christian Wood's stat set, etc., on his high volume. And um, my only concern about Wood is that I'm almost, he could be somebody who's injury prone. He had an ankle sprain late in the season last year that he said it hurts. I'd prefer not to play during the time that the games don't matter. So I go in my mind, he might actually be a soft player. I mean, when I say soft, I mean they don't handle injuries too well.
Yeah.
They're not Iron Men, like, let's say, like James Harden, who will play through a swollen ankle and play 30 plus minutes regardless, right? There are
Yeah.
certain players who will play through pain. Not everyone is Allen Iverson, who will give up his body and for the sake of the game. And Christian Wood is not that kind of guy. uh yeah, Dynasty. Yeah, Shingun is just crazy good for the future. Right now, it's a question. He's probably more of a deep league guy. I wouldn't touch Shingun in a standard league. Maybe 16. I mean, I've been in two 16 team league drafts already. The real ones, not mocks. And he's been picked up late in the last 2 to 3 rounds. So yeah, He's got some upside. Again, these drafts that I've done are way too early, and I would have preferred to have seen them after done them after some preseason games. But it's a roll of the dice right now before the preseason, and we will see. We will see. And I'm cautiously optimistic. There is the right term I would use for Shingun.
Yeah, he's actually really good, and Rockets kind of like turned it around since the post Harden era, and they really love what they did in their lineup right now. The KPJ signing, they did a very solid draft this season, and then things are looking better for the Houston Rockets. On the other hand, Ivica Zubac has been a solid center for quite some time. Thing is, he doesn't have that fancy stats to the point that the ceiling is super low as well. But with Kawhi Leonard out, do we expect more, at least having more points this season? I'm also not sure if Ibaka will play in their lineup.
I think Ibaka will play. I think Ibaka will be able to bounce back a bit from last season. He opted into the last year of his contract because as everyone knows, he's coming off back surgery. So this is Ibaka's last chance to hope for a one last contract after this one. So he will play. He will try to play better. Um, sorry, Zubac is a guy that regardless of the minutes you give him, he's not gonna be a 2010 guy. No, he's not even gonna be a 15-10 or a 12. He is why he's had success in fantasy is because he shoots his free throws well, and he doesn't commit turnovers. But he also has a limitation because he's not a great shot blocker. He's a slow lumbering center. Um, and he'll at best give you one block a game, right? And he'll give you decent field goal, but he won't score so much. And he's more of a rebounds guy. And just the fact that he doesn't hurt you in your free throw is what keeps him within the fringes of standard league conversation. I don't think, yeah, if anything, it'll be a slight trend down, but not the trend up for sure.
I got it. Maybe you can partner him with Miles Turner because the deficiency really suits
Yeah,
those two
late in the
guys.
draft, that's
Yep,
as a rebounding specialist, maybe. Yeah, yeah, that's the kind of thing that works, especially if my build is something that's trying to preserve free throws. Yeah, definitely.
got it. How about this dude? He was really highly regarded last season. People are kind of like you know uh, they were divided into two perspective. One is he's a super solid draw talent. The other one is we don't have enough historical games to really assess him. Where do you stand for James Wiseman?
This is a bit sore for me. Last season, I went all in on James Wiseman. I went hard on James Wiseman. In my dynasty league, I traded two top 10 picks to get the first pick. And instead of LaMelo Ball, instead of Anthony Edwards, I went with James Wiseman. So you can see how much headache and heartache the guy brought me. In a lot of leagues, also, I picked him just outside the top 100. So I really reached for James Wiseman, hoping that he could be a potential unicorn. And yeah, to be fair, he did show some flashes of that, right? Because
Yeah,
in the end, I put too much merit on those three because he only played. Okay, for everyone who might not be aware, he only played 3 games in college, and is very before he opted not to return um, to Memphis. He was playing for Memphis then um, during the during the pandemic. So it was a very limited sample size. I was going hard. I banked on him. I bet on him, and it exploded in my face. And then, um, but there. That aside, okay, assessment wise, the the ownership, the organization of the Warriors are really committed to him. His teammates are really excited to contribute to his development. That's a crazy amount of support for any young player to have. And he is somebody who may have been super demoralized after um, injuring his knee in your rookie season after being a, to- a top three pick. Um, it's he might fall. I don't think he's not yet ready to start the season as of now. The latest injury report is that he will be assessed after October 15 is when he will be reassessed on whether he can go into full contact or 5-on-5. So he might not start the season. So in standard leagues, I'd avoid him. In deep leagues, he's worth a flyer late in your drafts. But he might see a bounce back because, like I said, everybody's committed to him. All that support system is unheard of because um, despite the win now scenario that the Warriors are putting themselves in with the return of Klay Thompson, the owner has been adamant in not letting go of Wiseman. They want to keep him as part of their future. They want a clean transition from their win now to a solid franchise still. They don't want gaps. And they see him as a core piece for the future. They did. I think there was a time that there were rumors circulating that Wiseman could be included in a package for like Pascal Siakam. I don't know if you heard that. There were
Yeah, yeah.
rumors before, and those were shot down immediately by the owner saying that we don't want to change. We don't want to trade Wiseman. We want to keep him, and we believe in him. So um, he's gonna fall because of um, the recency bias from last season, but he might be a pleasant surprise and outperform, let's say, a Daniel Gafford, for example, once he's healthy.
To be honest, we actually shared the same experience for James Wiseman. In my dynasty league, I picked third, as far as I remember. I actually did some trade. Uh, I got Colin Sexton a pick and two picks, which includes me to be able to pick uh third for that draft, and I traded Donovan Mitchell because I was thinking um I have in my lineup. I really need some bigs because I have injury prone bigs. I have Embiid there, so I am really eager to get that value big. So I did a trade, and yeah, it also really exploded to my face. But I agree with how you passionately see how the Golden State Warriors invest on him. The fact that they didn't do any trades or any moves to get another big in their lineup right now, despite Kevon Looney being that injury prone player that has always been, means that he is really he's actually being mentored by Draymond Green as much as they can. To the fact that whenever you see the practices on how they teach James Wiseman, you'll be excited because he's actually kind of like a freak of nature as well. He has a good skill set. He's a good shooting form. He has a good touch in terms of how he shoots the ball, and he also is a very good what they call this defender. Maybe not yet on the level that he could adjust the defensive awareness on how you switch in terms of in defense, because that was his big hole last season. They were
Yes, he
really
is. He's slow to switch. He's too slow to switch.
exactly.
Yes.
But I'm still high on him, hoping that within the next at least 3 years he it will already show, because Draymond Green isn't it won't be that uh kind of like motor guy at least the next 3 years for sure. He's gonna slow down. He's gonna tone down how he plays to really conserve and preserve his value in the league as well. Especially that Curry isn't getting younger as well. Clay Thompson isn't that. I can't see Clay Thompson as that. When Curry goes old, Clay Thompson takes the lead. I can't see that happen for Clay Thompson. So I really think James Wiseman is gonna be a big deal for the GSW in the future. Hopefully in the near future. This is gonna be quick for you, Cody Zeller. He has been contributing steadily several weeks, maybe on and off. Sometimes he's good, and then if you need blocks, he's a good streamer. But he always gets injured. Always. I mean, the only reason you draft Cody Zeller, at least in my experience, is you can find any starter center down the line, and then you see Cody Zeller. Hey, he was actually playing in the Hornets, and then you pick him. But now he was traded to Portland Blazers. What can you say about Cody Zeller? People are saying that he has an upside in terms of Nurkic being injured, but the moment they got Larry Nance, I think that went kaput. So
I have nothing to add. I think you covered it. I would not draft Cody Zeller um, outside of my 30 team experts league. I'm not interested. He was pretty much undrafted in both 16 team leagues. Just leave him on the wire and only rush to pick him up in the event that Nurkic does get injured. But he's not worth drafting.
got it. How about Splash Mountain? He actually trended down last season, maybe because of how they used Bobby Portis whenever Giannis is not available. There's still like blocks and snipes that you can get out of Brolo, but do you think that trend goes like down this season, or will he kind of like have a mini trend up scenario because they actually lost PJ Tucker, who really played a good value in reality for the Milwaukee Bucks.
I don't see Lopez changing that much. He's another year older, but then his game is very longevity friendly. The fact that he developed the outside shot, um, yeah, he's probably good for 1.5 threes, 1.2 blocks, um, 5 point something to 6 something rebounds if you're lucky. But that's it. Well, fine. The fact that he doesn't hurt your free throw percentage, the fact that he doesn't give you turnovers is what carries his value. But I don't see much of a downside. I don't see much of an upside either. So he's fallen um, in draft ADP because of expected age, expected decline, but he'll still be solid. I mean, to the point that if he falls enough, he'll be a value guy. So in
Yeah, for
that
sure.
sense, that he will be able to outperform ADP because the sentiment is so low on him.
Got it. He's like we usually call him the poor man's Miles Turner because of the stats that he provide. Next up is Daniel Tyus. W- w- if given an opportunity, he really provides solid stats. But we've already talked about how kind of like messed up the rotation will be for the Houston Rockets. So if you need some centers down the road, would you trust Daniel Tyus to help you out?
Yeah, yeah. I think he will perform better than the stats he produced with the Celtics, and he was really brought in a more of a mentorship role, for the young big men of the Rockets, and he okay, he'll have to teach them by example of how to defend properly, and he will be on the court to show them that. And I think he'll provide enough value to still be a fringe standard league guy. So he's somebody you could pick at the end, like you said, in the scenario when you missed out on big men, or you want your third or fourth center, for example, for your team. He'll give you a bit of everything, and he's not somebody who'll hurt you anywhere. Fine, he doesn't rebound or block too much, but he can shoot the occasional three. Um, he's he's a low upside, but then reasonably steady floor. Okay, it'll be um, unlikely that he will fall outside of the top 200. Given the situation in Houston there.
Yeah, and
So
he's actually a very solid kind of like stat provider. And then maybe there's an upside if Christian Wood goes down. So that's how
yeah,
I
yes,
see
yes,
Daniel Tyus.
and as I said, I'm almost willing to to question my trust in whether Christian would I'm to question my trust in Wood's durability. I have a question mark already there. So Tice is a good handcuff. So if you draft Christian Wood in the middle rounds, it would be wise to take Tice as your late round center as a backup to handcuff.
Exactly, exactly. This next center is gonna be big because he's been the darling of the drafts right now. Now, majority of the people are really super excited for him. I am too, but something that really bugs me is Kelly Olynyk on how their coach handled his minutes when Mason Plumlee was there, and now they got another well-rounded veteran that can play ahead of this young stud in the name of um, what do you call this? I was
Stewart,
really
Stewart.
Isaiah Stewart. There you go.
Okay.
Thing is, in return, I was also contemplating wherein Detroit Pistons actually spend a lot for to get Isaiah Stewart. They kind of like rich him during the draft. I was surprised they got Stewart. I thought that they could get Stewart the next round, despite instead of like reaching or using their early pick to get him. So I'm now torn if Detroit is big on him, and then if Detroit would allow him to be, and let the coach play more Kelly Olynyk over Stewart. What's your call?
Okay. I'd like to correct something there first. First of all, Mason Plumlee, it's not the same situation as Plumlee. Plumlee most exclusively played center. Olenek can and has played power forward. So in a situation where they're, let's say, resting Jeremy Grant, they can bring in Kelly Olenek, let's say, off the bench and play him alongside Stewart and not necessarily replace Stewart for those center minutes. So I'm not as afraid of Olenek as I was, let's say, if assuming Plumlee stayed around in terms of Stewart. But like as you said, Stewart is already the darling of fantasy managers. He's being targeted aggressively. In my last drafts, he was going in the 70s range. It's that's pretty aggressive, and um, while I'm a believer in his potential, that's more or less kind of there's very little profit to take at that
Yeah.
range. I would prefer to have taken him much later. So at the time that they're taking people Stewart in the 70s, I have other reasonable options. So if I miss out on him, I'm not gonna cry about it. It's just that the market is just too excited. So I'm odds are not gonna get to own him because it's very hard to target him aggressively on sheer. It's he's in a similar but smaller boat uh, to Robert Williams
Yeah.
in the sense that his per minute production is very promising. He has a stat set that's very tantalizing, and the expectation is if he gets a high number of minutes, he's gonna perform really well. Yes, I do expect that uptick in minutes. I do expect him to play really well. But if you're drafting him so close to the top 50, I mean, his ceiling probably somewhere in the top 50, right? And the
Yeah.
closer you get to the top 50, when you pick him, there's not as much meat on the bone to appreciate anymore. So I'd rather get guys later who have a bigger jump. You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
get more value. But I mean, I like him. I mean, I'm on board. I see the positive outlook. But everybody, he's not a secret anymore, and everybody's excited about him. So it's really hard. So yes, he will get better, but so is the demand.
And the moment that people missed out on those center runs in the middle rounds,
Yeah, yeah.
that's the time people are really reaching for Stewart. To be honest, in mock drafts, I see him getting drafted in the mid 60s already.
Wow. So
He's
it's really
he's,
pushing.
he's yeah.
Ah,
I'm not sure, but I remember seeing that his ADP is around 67 already, or
oh no.
so,
Okay.
but
All right. So when he broke out last season, he was able to flirt with top 50, right? On a few limited games. Now the expectation is, can he become a top 50 player consistently? That's really hard because um, you still have to take into account fouls. He can become foul prone in some games, and that's a big question mark that will affect his minutes. So I worry about the consistency. I do not question the upside. I'm on board, but I'm worried about the consistency. And again, yeah, if I'm gonna spend a top 60 pick for a guy who will give me top 50 value, no, I'd rather save my upside guys for later. You know, because it's too
Exactly.
close to what he might deliver.
For sure, for sure. Next two players is gonna be straightforward. Do you think Enes Kanter has a chance to still provide that? Because he was like one of the favorite ads last season due to the
Oh
Nurkic
yeah, yeah.
injury.
He
But
was crazy good. He was such a
exactly,
surprise when Nurkic went down. Um, but no, there is enough depth in the Celtics front court between Williams, Horford playing, both of whom will clearly play ahead of Cantor. Um, he'll see very, very limited minutes. I'll be surprised if he cracks 15. He's just very, very limited. He's just literally an insurance policy in shorts for them, to make sure that they have a third center. But he's not going to be worth it in fantasy. So I wouldn't draft him in. I wouldn't even draft him in 16 team leagues.
exactly. This one, people remembered D12 providing some handcuff value last season for Joel Embiid. I do you think he would still provide that much of a value? Because whenever he's given an opportunity, he kind of like, at least in deeper leagues, kind of help GMs. But they have the Andrey Jordan. They all maybe they play um bro in the center sometimes to enable mellow play at the four. I don't know.
The upside for Howard at his age already is very limited. At best, he will be a blocks streamer in a lot of leagues, even deep leagues. I wouldn't draft him at all. So it's just not worth it. I I'd only remotely consider him in leagues that are 20 deep or deeper. So yeah, I'm not too excited.
Got it. And we've already mentioned this earlier. Mason Plumlee, he has an interesting role this coming season for the Charlotte Hornets. He's the lone, what they call this, straight cut center in the team because PJ
Yeah.
Washington is kind of like a small ball center. I
Yeah, yeah.
still think PJ Washington gets more minutes because, to be honest, I sometimes call PJ Washington as Borrego's prodigal son because he's kind of like he's one of the favorite players that he has in the team. But do you still think Mason Plumlee could help teams this season?
Yes, definitely. He won't be as great as he was in Detroit, but okay. Um, the the Hornets were notorious last season for not even playing small ball. They played micro ball. All right, they were
Yeah,
playing as small as possible, but they ran into certain situations where that's not viable. Okay, because even if all five of those small guys gang up on Joel Embiid, he will still dunk on the entire team,
for
right?
sure.
And, and they will just fly off. They realize that they need an able-bodied big man when the tempo slows down and the other opposing team is the one dictating the tempo and they're playing a half-court set and they have a dangerous big man punishing you in the low post, and PJ Washington is just standing there and getting pushed back, right? They need a body, and that's what they realize, and that's what Mason's role is with this team, and he's going to provide that. And there will be enough situations given them the matchups in the league that they're going to need Plumlee, and he is actually the what made him see such a renaissance in fantasy last season was the development of his passing game. It
Yeah,
was very solid. So if you have a big man who can pass out of the post like that, it just serves to improve your options because PJ Washington is not a great passer, not to the level of Plumlee's maturity yet. So yeah, I think it'll be slightly lower than Detroit, but he's not gonna fall off really hard.
He
Yeah, that's
learned a
my
lot from he learned a
yeah
lot
yeah.
from Jokic for sure. uh, Next up, Steven Adams. He had one of his worst season last year. Will that continue coming to the Memphis Grizzlies, wherein they have a very, very solid tandem in Triple J and Xavier Tillman? I really like those Huskies, uh, you know, being
All right.
played.
Yeah, I think trending down is my outlook for Adams. Um, he will be a rebounding specialist at best and a physical enforcer, similar to what Plumlee is going to be doing for the Hornets, because JJJ and Tillman will have a hard time against really bigger centers, and that's where Adams will shine. But in situations where the Grizzlies can run and rely on, let's say, any other combination of, let's say, JJJ, Tillman, or even Brandon Clark, who's also pretty solid. Those three might be the priority, and Adams becomes a lower priority in the front court rotation.
Yeah, I also think that this is the time to really validate and let Triple J do his thing. Uh, I,
Hopefully,
I
hopefully.
I think he should be healthy because he had a lot of time to really rest
Well, just
last
because he
season.
should, that doesn't mean he's gonna do it for you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I like JJJ because he's another per minute monster. Actually, he doesn't play 30 minutes per game. He only plays somewhere in the 25-minute range. Imagine if he plays 32 minutes. Yeah, it's crazy to think about it. Um, but Steven Adams, he'll trend down, but he'll still get some minutes. There was this one thing I was able to watch before that a few players were asked who they considered as the strongest NBA player, physical strength wise. They were quick to answer Steven Adams. He is really deceptively strong. So, um, in the case where you need someone to really put a hard, strong body on a big man, let's say like Joel Embiid, or let's say Carl Anthony Town, or anyone, any center that will try to post up against you, Adams can be there and be that solid offensive defensive rebounder for your team.
for sure. Because I also believe that he has a very good basketball IQ. The way he sees and reads situations, especially during the days that he was left out back in OKC. He was actually
Yeah,
leading
yeah.
the team in terms of just being there and being the present.
Plus the
Next
Aquaman
one,
memes.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Such resemblance, right? This
Yeah, yeah.
one, uh, this is one of my favorite last pick if I have a lot of IL in the in the league settings. Just I was just thinking that maybe I just put him in IL and then after drafting I could just get someone in the free agency that is kind of
Right.
viable. But do you believe in Thomas Bryant? He's
Okay.
pure offense.
All right. Here, for your listeners, since it is okay to speak in Tagalog, right?
Yeah.
Um, it captures my sentiment the best. Thomas Bryant, crush ko dati yan. Pero break na talaga kami. Sorry. um, I really was in love with this game for a long time. Um, I liked his potential. I liked the fact that he can shoot threes, he can block shots, he can shoot at a decent volume and produce an impact on field goal. But the poor guy's been so injury prone. He's burned me so many times. And my rule of thumb now in dealing with him, if he bounces back and I miss out, okay lang. Next year na lang. Tsaka na
Yeah.
lang. Right? But now, sige, let somebody else roll the dice. My heart cannot take it anymore. Masyadong na heartbreak na ako kay Thomas Bryant. Sorry. Pass na lang, boss.
Last season would have been big for him, to be honest. I was expecting a lot last season, but
I know.
I mean, he killed us in the first
What
week of
happened?
the season.
Olats, right? So,
Yeah.
no thank you.
Uh, Next up, despite getting limited minutes, I really admire how Nazrid provides mini stats. I kind of like this dude. What can you say about Naz Reid?
It's so crazy because one of the things that I like to do is take a peek at per minute guys, and Naz Reid is one of the more fun per minute guys who just makes the most of his time on the floor, considering he's playing behind such an important player like Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah,
He's actually playing minutes in the 20s, which is pretty solid if you think about it. And a lot of his minutes fine got bloated a bit when Towns went down with COVID and whatnot last season. But I love Naz Reid as a deep league last center kind of guy. Um, he is he will be ignored in almost every league
for sure, for sure.
because the assumption is there won't be enough minutes for Naz Reid because Carl Anthony Towns, blah blah blah. But in the end, he finds a way to contribute. He doesn't need a lot of minutes to give you 6 rebounds and a block, and maybe suddenly a random three and
Yeah,
50 field goal. And I go, hey, that's odds are average on average better than the pickup I would have gotten if I streamed, for example, right? So, of course, his biggest appeal is if Carl Anthony Towns goes down, etc., etc. But he's shown that even playing behind Carl Anthony Towns, he's decently productive. So, yeah, I would probably be willing to own him um, in 16 teamers. Like in my 16 team leagues, two of them that, if I have some upside picks that don't pan out, I might drop them and just pick up Nasri. That's an example of what I would do because if I want more stability on my team and I need a big man since he's an FA right now, yeah, sure, okay. This late round pick didn't work out. Here's Nasri. Okay, I'll take him. I mean, I trust him enough that it's a low ceiling, but it's a reliable floor. Surprisingly, that he's provided. So yeah, I don't see much of an upward trend because of. I expect actually Towns to play to be healthier, but he will have a stable floor. I don't think he will trend down either.
exactly, exactly. And the last center that we have for this episode. Um, this is this is something that is juggling in my mind. Derek Favors played around 15 minutes to maybe 18 minutes to 20 in several instances behind Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is after that injury year, he's been healthy always. Hassan Whiteside, despite the bashes and everything, if there's like enough minutes, he could give you at least blocks. Now, behind Rudy Gobert, do you think at least in deeper leagues he could provide value?
Okay. For context and for your listeners, yeah, he was one of the late round picks in my 16 teamers, but I was not one of those managers who picked him. I don't trust him. Uh, I feel that his explosive season with the Blazers was a fluke. He's a bad player. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that he's a downward trend kind of guy. And he will not provide you anything in his 12 to 15 minutes, assuming he gets that much. Um, I mean, if I was the Jazz, okay, if I was the coaching the Jazz, depending on the matchup, I would probably trust Royce O'Neal to play center and run small over bringing in Hassan.
Or
That's
Rudy
how.
Gay. Because Rudy
Or
Gay also
oh yeah,
plays
yeah, fine.
center.
Even
Yeah.
Rudy Gay, okay, yeah, Rudy Gay or Royce over Hassan. So no, thank you. Um, I mean, I can't call him trending down because he's at the
He's
bottom.
already down.
Yeah, he's at the bottom. I mean, he's on the floor. If you step on him, it's like parang apakan mo pa, nakatapa ka ng tahe. So, dudumihan lang sapatos mo, right? But you have a point. At some point, there might be a window of, let's say, 1 to 2 games. He'll be a block streamer. But that's all he is. Don't draft him. Just stream him situationally. But other than that, that's his upside. It will take a catastrophic injury to Rudy Gobert, okay, which is very unlikely based on his health in recent seasons. So, no, I'm definitely not high on Whiteside whatsoever. I am not interested.
The only
Uh,
upside I see here, which isn't even relevant to fantasy, is finally he would learn how to defend in his long career. I hope he learned something out of Rudy Gobert because I really researched some videos and some basketball coaches in America in showing some comparison how good Gobert reads defense, how good he adjusts, and I'm hoping at least for his
Gobert
own
is
good.
smart. He's
Yeah,
very smart.
exactly. I hope Hassan gets something out of it, at least even not in fantasy, because Hassan Whiteside is someone that people remembered because of that Portland burst and maybe those Miami heydays. But yeah, I think that's
Outlier.
Hassan
That's what
Whiteside
I
for
call
you.
an outlier and a fluke. So um no, it's no more. No need. He's like
Got it, got it.
he's I can get blocks elsewhere. I'd rather stream Bismack Biombo. Oh, I over Hassan Whiteside. Nothing.
And we if you're watching right now in YouTube, you can really see Eric's facial expression that really sums it all. So that's actually all of it. To be honest, I really had fun and I really learned a lot to the point that I think for listeners, if you if once this episode gets uploaded, I think despite being that long kind of
It's
like
so
episode,
annoying.
yeah, you can just move forward and check out specific centers because we've almost tackled every centers that we can think of. So it's a very solid episode. Next year, I'm gonna think of something how to really make this a little bit shorter. But thank you so much, Eric. I really love the session. I hope you had fun. And then I'll give you the table to really tell everyone what would we expect from you and how would we see your work.
Oh, all right. First of all, thank you for having me. And yes, I also had a lot of fun guesting on your show tonight. Well, we're recording in the evening, so it's tonight for us. And yeah, on Twitter, please follow me at Rotomancer. That's ROTOMANCER. Um, and I'm an editor at Hoopball. That's hoop-ball.com. And we're one of the top fantasy basketball websites out there on the internet. And regularly, our draft guide helps so many GMs crush their leagues. Even new players, they get their hands on the draft guide. It accelerates learning. Like you said, you've appreciated that you learned a lot. There's a lot of content in our draft guide. Give it a look. Um, I mean, yes, we charge a subscription fee, but you'll get paid back at the end of the season when you win that pot money, baby.
Yeah.
So yeah, right. So it's think of it as an investment, and as we put it, as an expression here in the Philippines, tuition lang yan, right? Tuition to get better, right? So again, thank you very much for having me on your show, and I look forward to maybe guesting again at some point in the future.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then also, I would invite you. We have like a league wherein we kind of like ask the guests that we have here. Maybe if you still have the bandwidth, I'll be chatting you later because I'm pretty sure you have a lot of leagues. So
I'm
let's talk
committed to
about it.
9 already as of now, and I wanna keep it at that level. But we'll see. We'll see. All right. I'm afraid that I'll go over my limit. I mean, it's a big improvement. I used to play in 18, and every season, so I really wanna improve uh, in order to focus on certain leagues, like
Yeah,
high roller league. Like I have one 10K buy-in league. Na that's
boom.
pretty hefty, right? So
Yeah.
I want to focus on that. But thanks, I appreciate the interest.
Great, great. Thank you so much again, Eric, to our subscribers and listeners. Like, subscribe again, follow, share, and comment. Again, maybe you'll like get shocked of the hours that we spend here, but that's actually the juice there. We've spent a lot of time. We heard a lot of insights coming from a very tenured sports analyst, very good fantasy basketball analyst. He've already explained that earlier before we start the show. So we are getting some goodies for this episode. And also, this is a special episode because this is an episode that involves our own Filipino pride that represents the fantasy basketball in the NBA fantasy industry. So, thank you so much. We are available on YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Teacher, and sometimes in Periscope. So, mga paps, see you. Happy weekend, almost weekend. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of you guys drafting. Keep following the page, keep following the content, and we are, especially me, I'm just, out here trying to help you out. Kaya salamat and bye-bye.